This video presentation has been classified by the ABC as M. It contains material that is not recommended for persons under 15 years.
As well as watching this vodcast, you can watch Good Game on ABC2 every Monday night at 9 o'clock and ABC1 late on Friday nights after Triple J TV. In just a moment, we'll be bringing you our impressions of the latest Warhammer 40k title, Dawn of War 2. But before that, let's get a bit of perspective on this whole Warhammer thing. It all started with these little guys. In 1975, a group of friends, including industry legends Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson, invented a tabletop fantasy game involving some painted miniatures, a few six-sided dice, and a whole lot of imagination.
The early days of Games Workshop were entertaining, to put it mildly. Gaming hobby did not exist in the 70s, other than board games that we used to import as players from the USA. And Steve Jackson and I decided, we were old school friends, to start a company based on our hobby, which is games. Warhammer role-playing started off first, and it was Warhammer Battles, then Warhammer 40k. And so that's a great big splendorous battle in front of you, which is fantastic.
Now, throughout the 1980s, there were plenty of video games based on Games Workshop properties. The problem is, none of them were based on Warhammer. Non-Warhammer strategy games like Apocalypse and the even less Warhammer Battle Cards would come out for the ZX Spectrum long before we'd ever see a glimpse of the pixelated land of Bretonnia. It would happen eventually, but the game to do it wouldn't be from the original Warhammer fantasy universe, it would be from the futuristic Warhammer 40,000. Ever since the first Warhammer 40k tabletop campaign was released in 1987, the game had become hugely popular. The combination of new setting and incredible miniatures pulled players in, and even sparked interest in turning the Space Marines and their enemies into computer stars. The first game to try was Space Crusade in 1993. Based on the board game of the same name, Space Crusade saw you controlling one of 3 Space Marine squads and facing off against a space station full of Tyranids. Like most early Games Workshop games, it played almost exactly like the board game, but the next Warhammer 40k game would put an end to all that.
Listen carefully.
That game was called Space Hulk. It came out in 1995, and once again you, the Space Marine, had to kill them, the Tyranids.
Die, slime ball.
This time, though, the game wasn't anything at all like the tabletop games that had come before it. It was a corridor-crawling shooter with a little bit of strategy thrown in for good measure, and it was pretty cool, even if the difficulty level was constantly set to punish mode. Of course, if you really wanted to see punishment, then you didn't have to wait for long, because the very next Warhammer-themed game to make it to computers was based on this brutal ball sport. It was called Blood Bowl, and it was just like a game of American football, except for the fact that you were tossing around the pigskin with a tribe of bloodthirsty Chaos Beastmen. And foul play wasn't just allowed, it was wholeheartedly encouraged. Of course, all that foul play was just a dice roll back then, and it would take until 1995 for this twisted sports sim to make the transition from cardboard to motherboard with Blood Bowl for MS-DOS. Packing everything that made it a classic board game onto a floppy disk, Blood Bowl for PC gave us all the sports strategy action we could handle, and it brought a whole new meaning to the term football hooligan. That very same year, the first proper game to be based on the original Warhammer fantasy battles would finally arrive. Warhammer Shadow of the Horned Rat initiated the Warhammer series into the real-time strategy genre.
Engage!
Pitching the player into a campaign against the Skaven, a race of giant rat men. The game's mix of squad-based tactical combat and 3D visuals would even be popular enough to get it a sequel called Warhammer Dark Omen for both the PC and PlayStation. Over the next couple of years, a lot of turn-based strategy games in the Warhammer mold would be released, but the next really interesting game on the Warhammer timeline was this. Warhammer 40k Fire Warrior was its name, and first-person shooting was its game. For the first time, you didn't play as a human space marine. Instead, you took control of a relatively new race, an alien Tau Fire Warrior. You had to go in all guns blazing against the evil forces of chaos, giving Warhammer fans their first chance to actually get up close and personal with the action that they'd usually only see in miniature. Unfortunately though, bland level design and stock standard FPS gameplay was this warrior's downfall, with the game's reception being pretty poor. And that about brings us up to the present. These days, Warhammer fans are getting their fix on various fronts, either through the reigning RTS series Dawn of War, or the World of Warcraft challenging MMO Warhammer Online. Things aren't looking too bad for the future either, with the recent announcement that a reinvention of a cult classic is drawing near. That's right, sports fans, Blood Bowl is coming back in 2009.
Kill the orcs that are out in the open.
For the last 9 years, Relic have constantly reinvented the strategy genre. First with the 3D space tactics game Homeworld, then with Dawn of War, which started the trend of shorter, more intense matches. And then later with Company of Heroes, with units properly finding cover and meaningful deformation of the battlefield.
And they've kept up the tradition in Dawn of War 2. In multiplayer, you'll have access to all races.
That means Space Marines, Orcs, Eldar, and the one we've all been waiting for, Tyranids.
But the single-player campaign is all about the Space Marines. Out of 6 squads, you can take 4 into battle, forcing you to pick your strengths, such as the Devastator Marines, who specialise in heavy machine suppressive fire, or the Assault Marines, who can rocket jump over enemy lines and force a melee combat.
On top of that, each squad is customizable. Squad leaders never die, and as they level up, you decide which of their skills to grow. Typical RPG stuff, and it doesn't stop there. Some enemies even drop gear that you can wear.
Yeah, and this gear has different stats as well, like plus orcs, or plus damage, or plus hit points, and I like this change in direction, Jung. It's kind of addictive.
I hated it, dude. I mean, I know war gear is a part of the 40k universe, but it just felt like I was playing Diablo 2 or something. It's too much RPG, not enough tactics.
But they've gotten rid of the base building and brought in this cover system from Company of Heroes, and to me it's just as tactical as Dawn of War, except that you're customizing before the mission starts instead of in the middle.
Yeah, at the start I dug that too. I was leapfrogging my units from cover to cover, but then you realize you don't actually have to do that. You can just left-click select all of your units, right-click what you want to die, and you'll be fine. And later on when you get Terminator armor, it becomes even easier.
So do you reckon it's just too easy?
No, it's just a bad system, you know? Like some of the abilities that you get are literally increased damage. When would you not want to increase damage? You know, in what situation wouldn't you want that? How about some imagination? And later on when you upgrade the abilities, you have about 4 that are increased damage for that unit and the units around it. So you go into every battle just cycling through the same abilities, and that's not tactical.
Every mission also tends to be the same. You pick which area you want to attack or defend in a risk-style campaign, and you can do these in co-op as well, but every map is walking your way up through idle enemies and then taking down the boss with 1 or 2 abilities.
May death erase the memory of the shame.
It's not until the last mission that you get what every Dawn of War player has been craving since 2004. Waves of Tyranids. The last mission is so good it almost equals like the worst mission in Company of Heroes.
And it's a fair point that Dawn of War has always been about the multiplayer, but, you know, a large percentage of people don't go online with RTS games, like 80 to 90%, and with such a disappointing and short single-player campaign, it's just not good enough.
We claim this in the Emperor's name.
When it comes to multiplayer, all of these niggles just seem to melt away. It's a pretty radical new format, but abilities are more balanced, cover actually matters, and the micromanagement is tactical rather than tedious.
Again, there's no base building. Each side has 1 protected spawn point on the map. Each unit has their own tech tree, which you customize mid-battle.
There is a degree of resource management though. You'll have to capture requisition points on the map so you can deploy more units, and you'll also have to capture power points. Around these you can build power plants. This kind of forces you to put your critical structures in the middle of the battlefield, meaning whoever has the upper hand also has a degree of vulnerability.
Which is good too, because people forget when you get rid of base building, you get rid of base destroying. Each faction has 3 leaders to choose from, and each of these have their own abilities and units, so they're essentially sub-factions, and it'll be fun coming up with different ways to, you know, take out your enemy and use different tactics with these.
It's the action-packed, micro-intensive, 10-minute matches that Dawn of War players know and love. You'll only get suckered into a long game when you're evenly matched, and those are the best games.
And it's fair to say, assuming StarCraft 2 is as good as the original, that when it comes out, all RTS is just going to stop.
Especially for competition. It'll be like if you're good at America's Army. Well, good for you, well done, but it's not Counter-Strike.
So, Jay, I think if we broke up our scores and I just scored the single-player component of the game, it's just too short, there's not enough variety. It's a 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, they are very different, aren't they? Multiplayer, on the other hand, I think has great potential. You know, it's a radical change. We're yet to see how popular it will be. But one thing's for sure, all of the community support is already there. The replays, the shoutcasts, the strategies, all that stuff from day one. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Let our enemies beware, for victory is ours.